Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. It's Jen Wilson and Amy Vetter. We're here to host our leadership lunch chat and talk about the things that are happening in the profession and in our lives. And hopefully you'll add to the conversation through live chatting or posting with us. So we'll pay attention to that too. I know for sure that we had a leftover from last week that we wanted to talk about partner compensation and sort of best practices or bad practices. I have a theory.
We're going to go there.
Yeah, I know. Do we want to? Should I have forgotten that one? Should I have left that hanging? And also maybe we'll talk a little bit about in-person meetings and what do we think is going to happen. Amy, you and I belong to a group called the New Horizons Group, and I did a survey of that group for our upcoming call and asked about in-person meetings and what people thought. So I don't want to necessarily steal the thunder of that survey, but we can talk a little bit about what some of the other, just what consultants seem to be thinking and what you and I are thinking about that too. But first, let's go to partner comp. Let's do something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to start or do you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll get us started there. That sure. I think actually I've had a number of discussions about this in recent months because there's definitely more focus on changing services, right? And the talk about going into advisory services has been, I mean, it's not new. So.
No, it is not.
It may seem new, but this has been, a service line that's been offered for a long time. But in a lot of firms, it's been a struggle to get it off the ground. And there'll be a million reasons why. But when you get down to it, normally it comes to the elephant in the room, which is partner comp. And not thinking like a corporation, but thinking about the business like an individual book of business. And I think this can happen in a lot of professions, right? Whenever there's a partnership, everyone's looking at, I want to get paid for what I contributed. But if there's no I and we, and if you have to separate yourself from the business in order for the business to grow and give its space to be able to offer new services that are needed for the customer base, but you have to get out of your own way. So whether you get an outside consultant to help or you can have the honest, transparent, authentic discussions in the room with no ego, which is really hard. Yes. But having the discussion about what's best for the business and how you compensate like a corporation would compensate versus on an individual partner book of business.
Yes. Well, I mean, you're all over one of the biggest challenges we have in this whole discussion, and that is, are we committed to build an entity together that will live and sustain beyond us, or are we just each trying to make a living? And, one of the big question marks about business model that directly affects partner compensation is, are we going to run a one firm model where we operate as one firm, we invest in infrastructure and administration and operations and technology together, like one for all and all for one. We look at our clients not as our own individual clients, regardless of who sourced the client or who serves them, but instead as the firm's client. We look at the entity as a sustainable thing. That's the one firm model where I'm trying to build something that will sustain into the future. I'll be compensated for my efforts and my value of my efforts, and I will be rewarded by some kind of a payout at the end of this thing. But I'm not trying to just maximize my own personal stuff. That model, the I'm maximizing my personal stuff model, is called in our profession, eat what you kill. And I'm serious. It's seriously, we have an acronym. We use the acronym for eat what you kill inside our business because we have to unfortunately use it often because we run into firms that are eat what you kill. And eat what you kill is all about, I will source my own business and I will serve it and I will get paid for it. And we will keep columns and pay attention to whose book of business is the biggest. That model is usually tragically flawed. And the first is it's based in selfishness. So, you and I are big proponents of and thought leadership developers around generosity, the opposite of selfishness. So eat what you kill is a selfish model, but it's also flawed because as a firm grows, it becomes this weird hybrid. I source my own business. I'm supposed to serve it, but it gets too big for me. I can't serve it myself. So I'm using firm staff and resources to serve my clients. In fact, I might even have clients in my column that I serve and another, or that I sold, but another partner serving. But I'm still trying to get all the credit for those clients. I mean, it's just a really goofy model. So, we're big proponents of one firm, but it is a complete philosophy shift for a lot of the firms out there.
Well, and when you think of, so there's two issues at work, right? One is there's partners that are close to retirement. So this is, a hard emotional thing to say, like, well, this is how I've predicted my retirement. And this is, so I'm obviously going to put my heels in the sand because I've worked for however many decades for what I think my piece of this is. But it doesn't necessarily serve the going concern of the practice. And secondly, it drives a whole process change as far as time and billing when you start thinking like a corporation instead of an individual, where in a corporation, no one is clocking their time of the work that they're doing in a corporate accounting department. Instead, it's deadline based, it's project based, service based, where, just like you do with your clients with job costing, like you're looking at P&Ls of how effective different units of the businesses. And this is a different way of evaluating your practice and your business, and how you compensate bonus wise, based on how efficient. So the problem is when we're used to a time and billing model, it's not actually driving efficiency, productivity, profitability, and not the best thing for the business as a whole. Yes. And so that is a huge mind shift in order to break through the partner comp issue so that, the business can do what it needs to do to get to the next level. And if you're not feeling like you can have that conversation, there's bigger issues in your partnership. As far as transparency and trust, that need to be delved into so that you can get to where you need to go in order to make sure you have a practice in the future.
So you just took on like world hunger and world peace, and I don't know what else, maybe, political unrest in our country. Maybe all three of those balled into one share there, Amy. Way to go. Because what you hit is
just leave it to me.
I know. I love it. Partner comp. We were on partner comp, but then you brought buy-sell in, which is, depending on how the buy-sell model is structured, it's often directly impacted by shifts in partner comp. Not always, but often. Sometimes it's share-based and it's not really tied, but often these things are tied together. And then you also then went to the biggest gorilla we have in the room, and that's time entry, right? So, and I tell people, change agents all the time, we'll take on time entry last, okay? But so I want you to go ahead. If you keep time and you love keeping time, I'm not trying to make you stop keeping time. I do think where Amy was that I want to underscore there related to time is an input. It is not an output. And paying people based upon inputs. I am the fastest keyboardist you might meet. I can enter a lot of time. It may not be valid at all. You may write it all off, but I could say
I work a certain amount of time.
Yeah, I work.
Put that time.
Yeah, I could be one of those partners that says I work 3,500 hours a year and I bill 2,500 of them, and you should pay me tons of money for it. Look how many hours I have in the system. Hours are an input. I don't care about your hours. What I care about is your results, and that's where you were really, is with that. The deliverables. And that's how corporate entities focus. What kind of results have you produced? What sort of profits have you contributed? What new products or new services or new industries?
Value?
Yeah. I mean, what new people have you developed? What departments have you been running successfully? All that, right? So I think that that's one of the big mistakes firms make in partner comp is they don't think about it from a results perspective. They think about it like, I'm the big dog. I've been here the longest, so I want to get paid a lot for tenure. I think that's, ridiculous. Second, I founded the business and own 52% of it, so I should get paid tons. That might be valid, but I don't know. Maybe you should get paid tons as your buyout. But if you're not contributing to the growth of the organization as time goes on at the same level as others, you shouldn't be the highest paid just because of your equity. Equity should not necessarily be tied to comp. It should be tied to buyout. So that's another huge mistake firms make. Paying, of course, on time-based measures, input-based measures is outrageous. I don't think that is valid in any model. I think you could pay based on billings or production or even better cash collected. But even those are what we would call current state measures. They're production-based measures. So if you get hit by a bus, we can't produce that production from you anymore. It's gone. You didn't build anything toward the future. Yeah, toward the future. We call those future capacity results. Future capacity results like new business developed, client relationships expanded, so new business inside our existing client relationships, new industries that we've served, and you created that industry group and built up that industry business for us. A service line that you run and that you have been beautifying and enhancing and making more efficient and more effective and better. Those are all results based, and those are future capacity based. They will outlast you. You will leave and they will last and be part of the entity. And those are worth the most. And firms often pay on these goofy measures, past-based measures, tenure, equity, time, what's in my column, which is fake. I can put any name in my column. I mean, that's an Excel grid or a report off the system. I need to be paid on future capacity results I produce. And yes, production. Current production is okay to pay on. But the current producers aren't necessarily the highest paid. The future capacity people should be.
Well, and just getting back to launching advisory services.
Yes.
You've got these, traditional metrics, I'll put it. It doesn't work in advisory. It just doesn't. So, so what happens too many times is that within a firm, an advisory practice gets launched, being evaluated on these metrics that don't work with a project-based client, with a relationship-based client, with a client that you're working with over and over again. So the problem is then what happens is the advisory services fail because the partnership is looking at it saying, oh, it's not meeting this utilization rate and the way we evaluate this service or that service. And that it's not a one size fits all. And so, I think the hard part is starting up a new service line is very entrepreneurial. And you have to have that within you to be entrepreneurial, which takes risk, which takes new ways of measurement, which takes new markets that you're going to be hitting and new ways of going about that market that you've never done before. And a lot of times in a firm, just because you're a partner doesn't mean you're an entrepreneur. So it's important when we go back to trust and communication, if I'm going to put someone as a champion of that practice, we need to be really honest. Is that person a risk taker? Is that person an entrepreneur? And what is our, how well are we going to support that person and be able to walk away? That I trust that person has a skill set that I do not have. And I'm going to allow them to run with this and with metrics, with guardrail. I mean, you come up with your plan, your business plan, just like you would in a corporation, no different. But being really honest about what you're good at and not good at and not feel challenged that everyone has to be good at the same thing. If you're really good at traditional service lines, stay there. Yes. But don't try to put traditional service line metrics against an entrepreneurial effort.
Agreed. And also, so that's like, that's a quote we need to stamp somewhere, right? I mean, don't put traditional compliance-based metrics on an entrepreneurial effort, especially a startup effort. I mean, my goodness, startup practices have to be measured differently no matter what. But second to that, right next to that, is this idea that there are different services in our practices, and they're consulting services or advisory services, that the measures will never be the same as a compliance practice. And in fact, I would argue, and I feel like I would argue this and win the debate, that audit, I'm serious, audit and tax can't.
When we're talking with nobody being able to talk back to us, it's awesome.
Yeah, that's how you win for sure. So audit and tax can't be measured the same, even to compliance services. I mean, I hear tax guys all the time say to auditors, but my service is realizing 97%, and yours is realizing 82%, so you suck. And the reality is like, hey, wait a minute. First, tax, if you're 97%, raise your fees. Second, though, audit will always realize less. But if we talk about sheer dollars or sheer cash produced, or revenue per engagement, or a whole bunch of other things, they're different measures. And we can't compare apples to oranges. You just can't. And people do it all the time. And one place this really gets me, Amy, I'm going to step up on my soapbox real quick, is
I'll
client accounting.
You have the stage.
Client accounting, though. Firms try to measure the CAS practice the way they measure audit and tax. And it kills off the entrepreneurialism. It kills off the growth. They ultimately strangle it because they don't hire people fast enough for the opportunity, because they're trying to use traditional measures for when to make those hires. And that drives me crazy. And so anyway, I just think CAS is a perfect example of a place where you've got a great startup and a wonderful high growth, fastest growing service probably in accounting right now. But boy, if you try to saddle it with old measures or compensate the people the same way, you're never going to see it.
And also not give the investment of time and money.
Right.
Like you would in the beginning of the practice in the first place, right? Like you weren't making money when that practice opened. It took a while, before you got the clients, the right processes, the right systems, made it more efficient. It's the same thing with doing a new service line. So it's really important, like when you're going about starting a new service line, that you have, again, those honest conversations of like, when do we think we will break even? And do we have the stomach for that? So if we don't have the stomach for that, we shouldn't do it. So let's just call it before we start investing it. But if we do know that we're not going to break even for 3 years because of the technology, the hiring, getting things efficient, if we beat it, great. But if we don't, we're okay because we knew what kind of investment we were putting in it for the result that we expected.
I love that. And now back to eat what you kill. You can't start one of those practices in an eat what you kill model, because who's going to pay for it? Right? When I don't think about this being one firm and we're all going to benefit 3 years from now, when this thing starts cranking profits to the bottom line, if we don't, all for one and one for all, if we don't put ourselves together like that in the one firm model, we're never going to have successful entrepreneurial startups. We're never going to get to that place we need to be on advisory and consulting, because it'll be, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to pay for that. He's not profitable yet. She's not, whatever. And your advisory folks will feel beat up and they'll quit.
Yeah. And start their own practice.
Yeah. So we're yeah. And yes, that's why we're seeing more startup practices today than we've ever seen before. And we were seeing that before this pandemic. Mm-hmm. And that's because we scare off entrepreneurial people instead of embracing them and getting them set up with the right winning formula and the right agreed upon expectations. So that's sad, because smart firms are starting these practices up and not bouncing their leaders, but a whole bunch of others are bouncing out a whole new generation of client advisors into the marketplace to start their own. Yeah. Well, we're at time. We're past time. We're close to past time. Any last thoughts? Anything? And guess what? We have a hanging Chad We didn't talk about in-person meetings, so we'll have to do that as usual.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say to our friends?
Yeah, I enjoy doing this with you every week, Jen, and also the feedback we've been getting, I think, is awesome. So if you have any comments or topics you want us to discuss, feel free to send them our way during the week, and we will make sure to bring them up.
Please do. And thanks, Amy. I love doing this with you. Have a great weekend.
You too.